I volunteer for a hospice and I visit a patient. My goal and intention is to visit the patient weekly. I have not been doing that. And I feel bad about it. And so the feelings that the whole reason I'm doing this is to give back, contribute, but then also, I mean, selfishly, it's to also feel good about the experience and gain some perspective in life, and just keep things in check for what's really important. So it's giving back, but I think when I give back, I always get something in return, emotionally, psychologically, from a mindset or something. And the challenge I had is that I wasn't holding myself accountable enough to go visit on a consistent basis. So taking one step back, what I'm about to talk about is when we're attempting to hold ourselves accountable to something. It doesn't have to be volunteering. It could be, sending a direct mail letter campaign out every week, or be following up with brokers, whatever it is. When we're attempting to hold ourselves accountable and it's not working, then we've got to change our approach, right? Obvious statement. So, but here's some something that I found interesting. I read the book Stumbling on Happiness, Dan Gilbert, about a year ago or so, and Colleen, my wife, is reading it now. And she mentioned, she reminded me of a segment or a part in the book that talks about volunteer work, and how they did 2 studies with patients who had volunteers visit them. They did one study with 2 different groups, an A and a B group. Volunteers in group A showed up randomly at random times and hung out with the patient who was near death. I think, 6-8 weeks. I forget how long they were supposed to have to live. And in group B, the volunteers did not show up randomly. Instead, they asked the patient, when would you like me to come next, and for how long? They asked them those 2 questions. And the interesting thing about the study between group A and group B is that afterwards, after the study was over, they went to check on those patients. And the patients in group A who had volunteers randomly show up, they didn't know when they were going to arrive or for how long, they died at a higher rate than the patients who received or who controlled when the volunteers would come next that week, what day of the week, and for how long. And Dan Gilbert, the author of Stumbling on Happiness, and if you don't want to read the book, just listen to his TED Talk. It's pretty much as good as the book, and it's much shorter, obviously, time commitment. He says that when we have control over something, that is a factor in how happy we are, and in this case, life or death. So here's how we tie it back to accountability for us. Instead, when I heard that, I thought, that's a powerful study. 2, that is the solution to my accountability problem with this one thing. Now, I don't have accountability problems in other areas or in most other areas, but this was one area that I was having a hard time keeping myself accountable for. The solution is I'm no longer going to show up randomly with the gentleman I visit with. Instead, from now on, I'm going to ask him, what day of the week would you like me to visit next week? And that way, and I would ask the duration, but my schedule's a little packed, so I'm not sure if I'm going to ask him the duration part, but I am going to ask him what day of the week. And that way, I will now be held accountable by him and myself, and it also benefits him, according to the study, where he has the potential to live longer because he has some form of control in when I arrive or the day I arrive. And so the takeaway for anyone in a situation where you're having trouble holding yourself accountable is give up the freedom to choose when you do stuff. Instead, delegate that out to someone else who is involved or on the sidelines who can help keep you in check. And when you delegate out the freedom to do the certain things, like do a direct mail campaign, then you're forced to almost do that stuff. So for example, if it's going to a direct mail campaign, if I'm just not doing it as frequently as I know I should be doing it, then find a way to automatically schedule it, or just call the company that you're paying to do the direct mail. Or if you're not paying them, then maybe you're buying postcards from them, or whatever vendor is involved in that process. Call them up and say, please give me a call on X date every month or every 2 months or every 2 weeks, whatever it is. And I am going to fulfill the order when you call, or take it a step further, give me a credit card, whatever. So that's the main takeaway. And it's founded in a study that is in the book, Stumbling on Happiness. And it's going to be, well, it's a life-changing thing for perhaps the individual I'm speaking to on a weekly basis, but it can also be applied to anyone who has challenge with accountability.
It's so fascinating that you were kind of you were having that, you knew you had that problem with the accountability with a very specific situation, which was your hospice volunteering. And then Colleen happened to be reading the book that had a study that was like a perfect fit for your exact situation. So I just thought that was interesting. And then kind of to reinforce your point about that, I was listening to a podcast with the psychiatrist, and he was talking about, and it's very similar to the study that you were talking about, but it's soldiers in war, and how the special forces soldiers are less likely to get the PTSD versus kind of just the regular soldier who's out on a patrol and gets attacked, because the special forces soldier is in control of the situation because he knows what he's going into. Whereas if I'm just strolling around in my Humvee, hanging out with my friends, next thing I know, I wake up and I'm in a hospital because I got blown up. That's obviously, both situations are chaos and not 100% your control, but the special forces soldier is in a lot more control than the regular soldier. And so, again, I'm not sure what the exact study he studied was, but he did say that the special forces soldiers are less likely to get PTSD than a regular soldier. And so that's kind of, I mean, obviously PTSD and dying is a little bit different, but kind of the same pattern there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it. That's thanks for making that connection into this. That makes sense.